give me a sword, give me a screwdriver, give me whatever, I'll still go into battle and I will still be a samurai. Like,
how often do you actually train? How often do you actually do like the best of the best that you could produce?
Welcome to the Infinite Creative Podcast. Today we have an interesting topic, my good sir. Would you like to kick it off?
So since Sean, my man, is down here in Florida and we're talking about the freelance, we're talking about the art, we're talking about like being the entrepreneur, and there's always like a balance and there's always something to do, and everything that is holding it together is basically the journey of mastering the art, mastering the business, mastering basically everything, because there's a journey. And yeah, today we're talking about mastery.
There we go. So yeah, we're going to talk about mastery. We're always talking about, like, you need to get better at stuff. You need to focus on things to become a master. But what the heck are we talking about? What the heck is mastery? And how do you even know you have mastered something? So I guess to kick it off, I guess, what do you think mastery is, I guess?
Ooh, so especially in 2023, this is the podcast where it's like, oh, everybody has no attention span at all. So everything is a TikTok short. Everything is like 10 seconds long. We cannot even pay attention to 1 hour and 30. And it is all about concentration and learning and figuring out all the details that you will miss in a thing that is like, okay, it's not good enough. Swipe, swipe, swipe. And you oversee little details. And mastery are details. Mastery is like when you're like, you have a product that you sell and it is like dialed into a level where it's like people don't really see it in the beginning, but the more often they are like use the product, the service, or whatever it is, like, oh, this is actually really valuable. Oh, this is really thought through. Oh, I see all the detail. This is really a master art piece, That is mastery for me, when you really see like all the things where you think like nobody thought about it, but it's designed to a T, and you really can like dive into the process.
Oh, yeah. I mean, to put it simply, it's going to kind of sound a little zen, but to put it, very, very simply, I would say it's understanding. It's instead of knowing, you understand things. You understand why things are the way they are. Now, you don't just know them, but you get why, and you understand why it was even that way.
To go one level deeper, you accept, there's change coming and you accept the change. It's like nowadays, it's like there's a lot of tools, that are coming out there, and they're just like, okay, we're going to steal your job. We're going to make your work easier. And accepting is the other part to it. It's like, oh yeah, there's change coming. You understand the change is coming. But with mastery, you kind of have to accept and take it in and just like, okay, we're going with the flow. We are the water. Man, this is zen today.
It is so zen. But I exactly. I think it's really so when we say mastery, it's I think a lot of people think of, you get good at something and then you're just stagnant. But actually, mastery is interesting because it kind of oversees everything. It's not really about the tool set or the process. You're at this kind of level where you're above all of that. You're like, give me a sword, give me a screwdriver, give me whatever, I'll still go into battle and I will still be a samurai. Like, so you get to this kind of level. It's almost like being a warrior in a way, where you're like, you are the weapon.
So on the note, I was like, now it's me going again too much into like, no, you're always being like, learning, you're always adapting. So if you would go into the fight with the sword and there's like a less experienced guy and you're just observing and you're learning from the beginner, even though you know it kind of all, but you don't know everything, because everything is constantly changing. Everything is like, going on, but this is like too broad. This is too meta. And I think we kind of should go a little bit into the whole why, and how, because like how do we learn new things and why do we learn new things? So in the web design world, what is the thing currently where you're like, okay, I kind of need to take a step back and observe and accept and see what is changing, how is it changing, what do I learn from it, Sean?
I love that, actually. It's so it's really like, it's learning from the democracy of web design. I think we've talked about it in past episodes of how even when you look at the trend of web design and search terms and such, and how it's fallen over the years, and how it's become less of a big button topic. What it actually makes me think of was what brand design was in 1900 versus what brand design is today. Brand design in 1900 was a very select people, probably in Swiss or Germany. It actually came out of Central Europe, the idea of what is brand design, where it was like these philosophical and cultural superheroes, these scientists really in lab coats kind of creating these brands. And what is brand design now today? Well, it's a young girl making it for a company down the road, and in Illustrator, and coming up with a little brand guide, right? So it's like these things kind of change. The sciences behind them all kind of change. And so I kind of forgot where I was going to go with that, but I think really the point I'm trying to get to here is that that you, as if you're going to be mastering things, you have to understand that the process itself is going to change and get more simplified. However, that doesn't mean that your role in it gets simple as well. It's almost this. There's a point when you, as the master, you have to take the reins, in that you're going to push everything to the next point. You got to push things to the next. So if things get easier. So in web design, to bring it back to your original point, what do I see in web design? Well, I see Squarespace. I see Wix. I see the democratization of everyone can kind of create their own websites easier and easier now, right? And in the web design world, you're seeing the same thing, where it used to be harder to be a web designer because I had to do, HTML code, and I had to hand type the code, and maybe I was able to, create templates and copy and paste, and that was still a thing, but I had a lot of just like Notepad and text documents. Well, that's kind of out the window. You have WordPress. You have these things that even, web designers, professional web designers are using. So the tool sets themselves are getting more and more simple. So could I be angry about that? Could I be sitting here and be like, well, I had to do all these things. I had to learn HTML and JavaScript, and there was no library things. I remember I had to buy a book to learn Photoshop, CS3, and I had to like painstakingly go through this book to figure out a program. Does that mean I need to keep doing that? No, I need to obviously adapt to things. Are going to get easier. That's not a bad thing. The world's going to get easier. That's it. We really should want that, right? Like if you love what you do, you should want to see that. So what I'm learning from that is like, okay, how do I push that then? How do I keep pushing the envelope? How do I take Squarespace and push it to the max? How do I take Wix and push it to the max? And how do I do these things, without, losing love for the craft?
Yeah. With that being said, like it is always easy to say like, oh, let's just push it to the max. And in the real world, we got clients, we got work, we got all the things, we got responsibilities, and we're just like either doing the bare minimum or we're doing like what we think we can do, but it's rarely that we push it to the max. And it's like, how often do you actually train? How often do you actually do like the best of the best that you could produce? And the real answer is like, some people never do it, and it's really hard to actually do that, because it's like, it maybe includes like, instead of doing a project for a month or two, it maybe is a year, it maybe is 5 years. Because like, if you measure the time and you measure everything, like how often do you actually work on one thing that long and deep, And for most of us, it's like we never really do that, and that's where you become like exceptional, in a weird way. Because like I could make one video that takes like years to be made, let's make it a movie, let's make it a just like a really interesting art piece, It does not have to be like hit record, edit, done, push out, it could be like a really dialed in masterpiece.
Yeah. Well, and there's one thing that I think that creates, and that's the sense of fulfillment. And I think that's some of the best things that I have, is things that I've created years and years ago that I still look at and I'm like, dang, that still looks really cool. That was still a really cool idea.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, that's fairly rare. I'm not going to I'm going to be honest. I'd say about 20-30% of my work that I've ever created that I could still look at and be like, I really like that. Even to today's standards, I wouldn't change a thing. I love this.
Yeah.
But you get that fulfillment. I think we forget about that, right? Especially like, we're in this time period of like, it's about quantity over quality. The thing that can happen if you get caught in that mindset is I feel like you have nothing on the wall to really show anyone later, right? If everything was so quick and you cut and you shortcut and you use templates and you didn't really create anything in the thing, you really just put stuff together and you didn't even do a good job at that, then you have nothing to really show over the years. Like if I can't ask you like show me your best video ever and you can't really do that, like that you're losing, you don't have that fulfillment then, I feel like.
So this is opening the box of Pandora basically, because like we all kind of, we're doing a thing and we're taking pride in this thing, and this could be anything. But some people game, for example, and they become really, really, really good in a video game, for example, Apex Legends, for example. You can spend like 30,000 hours, you can spend 10,000 hours, and you're just like, oh, I got a special badge because I did X, Y, and Z. Now the game is gone. All the skills are gone. It's like some things just evaporate, and it's like, in what do we put our time of mastery? Because like valuing it is like, it's like we said, it's very zen. You make the park, you make the garden, and then you erase it. But it's like, what do you pick to be that involved? Because like you say web design, will web design be there in 2-3 years? Will video be there in 2-3 years, or will everything be AI? I don't know.
Well, and that's very interesting. I mean, that's the interesting thing about digital art in general, right? Is that we're just creating this huge pile of content out there, and I'm not going to say it's a trash pile necessarily, but it's a huge pile of stuff. I think you see it a lot in stock music world. Go to a stock music site, and I always find myself running into stock songs, and I'm like, this is actually kind of cool. Like, this is actually like, but all this ended up being was a stock song that this guy put on the site, and maybe it's getting a lot of sales. Maybe he made a decent amount of money on the stock song, but it kind of gets forgotten. And I can't help but think, like, if you would have just gotten a singer on this and really pushed it, you could have actually maybe like just been an electronic act that was now touring the country. But instead, you created a quick buck on it, and maybe made $5,000, $10,000, and maybe it was a big success story. So you're telling all your friends, like, dude, I made a lot of money on this stock song, and maybe you've made a YouTube video about how you made so much money on the stock song. But you don't know that you could have been the next Odessa. You don't really understand that you could have like gone to that level, that you actually did step down. That's something that I kind of try to look at as well, of like, while I'm trying to create a business, and I think I could do that a lot better personally. This is me talking very personal of like, I've been someone that's been so hyped up in the creative world, and arguably my ego. And I think I think I'm just being honest here that I believe that that a lot of people that are creative out there do have to have some of their ego involved. It's just impossible to totally separate the two. And it's impossible. No matter how hard we try, it's just.
I want to talk about that a little bit, because like. So there was like a study made by like, I think I misquote this probably and I will mess it up, but the whole gist of the whole thing that I'm trying to say is like, there was like I think football teams or whatever, and they brought in sports coach sports psychologist, and the psychologist solves the problems of the sports people. I'm already talking really bad, but he basically solves the problem, and that basically created that zen that, oh no, I'm fulfilled, I don't need to push that hard. Fulfillment and being content is like kind of the devil of like not pushing the envelope. So that could be the ego. Like you kind of maybe need the ego to push it, to have that dog in you where it's like, okay, I gotta do this. You gotta, instead of like being like calm and like, oh no, I'm like a regular person, I'm content. I'm like, I don't need to do it for the money. I don't need to make it for the love. I'm just like, I choose to because I feel like it, instead of like having that, like that drive of like rage or whatever emotion is basically driving the progress, because like, yes, it's unhealthy, but that is the artist who is basically completely like, I'm drawing this art piece all night. I don't care. I don't care about my health. I'm like, I'm making this now because I want to create it and I want to be the best,
Yeah. Well, I love that you said that, because I think the main distinction between those two is internalizing the ego and externalizing the ego, right? And we live in a very externalized ego society where it's like, I talk to so many creatives where they don't even care if they like it. They just care if other people like it. And if other people don't like it, it must be crap. And it's like, no, you really like, I think you should still have this sense of ego, because it's really the sense of identity and all of the things that happen in your life up to that moment, because that's what's informed all of your decisions. I think it's like, so yeah, push the envelope, but who are you doing it for? And really you should do it for your inner child. You really should make that inner child laugh and be happy, and that's who you're doing it for. Like,
I wanted to say something, because like you said, like, you don't, some people care about who does like it, the client, do you like it? Who likes it? And I was like, in the business world, there's also like, I don't care if the client likes it or if I like it. It needs to check the box. And then it becomes an object. Then it becomes like just a thing that you just like, yeah, the client maybe doesn't like it, but it fulfills the contract, and it's like, that's what they wanted. And I'm like, they wanted art, but what they got is like an item, because it's like, you went to a business. You did not went to an artist. And I'm like, oof.
Well, and that's kind of good too, because that's one of the biggest lessons a lot of brand new designers learn very early on, is that you're providing a service. You're not an artist. You're a hammer, and you're nailing, and you're got all these nails. That's what this kind of is at the very bare minimum. And so you're not wrong when you think that. But you're right. It's an item, and when it's an item, you lose that connection, that kind of that kind of that heart pull of it. And you almost have to, because if you have your heart attached to every project, you learn really quickly as a new creative that you're setting yourself for heartbreak when that client just axes it, or the thing doesn't go right, or you misspelled the thing at the very last step and messed it up. If you have to, there is this detachment that has to happen just so you can keep going.
But I think we don't talk really about the you're the hammer and you don't care about being the hammer, but you need to be the hammer, and the nail doesn't want to be the nail, and the swinging needs to keep happening so that things are moving.
we push that metaphor a little too far, I think so like in terms of that, so what I would tell people, so how do I make sense of that? So what I would say is internalize the desire to do better, to hit those checklists, to hit the nails better, and that needs to be you holding yourself to a certain level, because I'll tell you what, if you hold yourself to a high level, you'll realize that nobody else is ever holding you up to that high level, and that's a great place to be. Because let's say you have a bad week or something hits the fan, if you're already operating up here and you drop a little bit, you're still meeting expectations. And so it's like, I think for most people, you really need to find that inner drive. And what I would even say now, and this isn't like my advice to just go out and do this, obviously, but if you can't find that, if you don't have that inner kind of that path, you don't feel that may be the first sign you're on the wrong path. You're on the wrong vertical, because you have to have that type of something in you. And your goal could be to make more money. Your goal could be to get better at the thing, but you got to have something. If you kind of look in yourself and you're like, I don't know what that path is, then you think you'd be surprised if you moved left or right into the next lane, you may find love.
Yeah, so with that being said, you kind of need to find that dog in you, that fire, that drive, something that keeps you going and hypes you up to a level if you want to be an artist. But if you want to just keep the hammer swinging, So that's why I'm like, Sean, you're on that where it's like, I maybe want to switch lanes. And I'm like, I don't want to tell you yes, no, maybe, because every industry is changing. And the one thing that I learned is the longer you keep on going, the easier it is, because you figure out more ways to monetize and make stuff with it. But you kind of need to wanting to do that in a weird way, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I've saw with some creatives that I never want to get to, and I've seen, I'm not going to ever point out names or anything, but I've definitely seen in some creatives where they've fallen out of love. They're either always talking about things that are going wrong. They're angry about it. They're not even talking about the work. And you can also tell too when you would compliment something of theirs and they don't brighten up. I think that's the biggest tell, is if I'm like, dude, that looks really good, and they're like, yeah. You're like, okay, is there nothing there? You didn't not yet again, because I don't want you to be super ego, yeah, I am the best. Yeah, ding. No, I think it's I don't want that either, but I can tell when you don't love it, when I'm even telling, I'm giving, you're doing great, man, this is great work, and I can't wait to see where you're going. They're like, yeah, I guess, yeah. And you're like, ooh.
That is the balance of is the hammer just swinging and it's just doing the act, or is it actually just you taking pride in it and you're being obsessed and you have that fire and that spirit in you, and we all have to decide, where do we implement the mastery, because it is a skill to learn, and nowadays nobody really wants to spend time and master anything.
This is a great thing to move on to, because I think, if I try to think of things now. If like I was at the end of high school, like where I was when I really started to decide to be a designer, it was at the beginning of my senior year of high school. And like, so I try to put myself now, if I'm a senior right now in high school, and I'm kind of hearing advice from people of like going to college, not going to college, all of those different things, moving out of state, staying in the country for that matter, or leaving the country, Yeah. And so, having all of these kind of things happening, I have people in videos telling me, you don't need to master anything. You can just use the shortcuts really well, and then you'll be able to make a lot of money. And, I'm hearing like, don't go to college. That's stupid. You can learn on your own by watching all these videos and doing all this stuff. And then you have people like, kind of like me that tell you, you should go to college because it's going to push you. It's going to give you critique. You're going to you should go to college for the not fun parts, not for the fun parts, if that makes sense. And so it's like, what I guess what would be your advice to that kid in terms of mastery?
So in that regard, because like you said there a lot, and there's a lot to unpack, because you're right with that, because you can get confused in like taking shortcuts and then like going from A to B, and you're actually going nowhere because you took too many shortcuts in too many directions. You never stuck with anything. And what you should do is like, do shortcuts work? Yes, they do. Do like strategies work, where I only do 1 year of school and then I go transfer to this and I'm doing that, or I apply to this job and then I'm actually using just the connections from this job to get whatever. All that works. The question is though, do you have the patience, to work with a strategy and how to break down your goal? Because like, if you don't really have a goal and you're just going with the flow, the shortcuts will not work because you will not stick with it long enough. You don't believe in it, you will not put in the work to make it work, because like there's like strategies for everything, and like there's like speed runs in video games, there's and you can apply tactics in real life, like make an Etsy shop, steal a design and sell it. There's like ethical ways, unethical ways. There's like the gray area in between, and it's like, how do you ride this wave? And it all comes down to that passion, and the goal. Yeah. And if you have like a clear goal, what most young people do not have, if you're like young and you're out of school and you do not know what you want, and you're just like, you got to pick something, stick to it, and set a goal.
Yeah, well, and furthermore, as a young creative, like what the heck kind of goal can I make when I just make weird stuff? Like as a kid, as a teenager, you just make these things that maybe your parents love, maybe they don't, maybe some of your friends are like, you're cool, maybe they don't.
Do.
It's so hard. Like it's so hard to like really know what the heck of the angle is, especially if you ever do like a Google search or ask ChatGPT about like what are all the creative jobs. You're just going to find that there's hundreds out there, and that's cool, but it's also it's too much. It's like, where do I go? What is my creative journey? What's really interesting, I studied, kind of some of the famous painters out there, like Salvador Dali, Da Vinci. Dali's really funny. You look at some of his first paintings when he was young, being a teenager. They're not really. There's similarity to his later work, but it's completely different. So he had no idea. He's just like painting fruit like everyone else, painting a sunset like everyone else. He didn't know what his creative journey is. He didn't know. So it's really hard when you're getting to like, that early part of life to really see like mastery. Sure, but mastery of what? Like, where do I go?
So that is like one of the things where I was like struggling with the most, because like, how do I pick my niche? And obviously on the internet you hear, and right now here you hear a lot of opinions, and it goes like, oh, you gotta love what you do, and then some people say you don't have to love what you do, and it's like there is no right or wrong answer. The question is like, can you keep on doing? Because like when you as soon as you stop doing, everything is falling apart, and you have to pick and choose a new path. And maybe that path will work better out, but if you learn on like letting things go and giving up, you don't really learn mastery. And that is like one of the things, like you have to set yourself a goal, achieve that goal at no matter what cost, and then after that you kind of achieve mastery. When you do that art piece where I'm like, okay, I finished that in 40 hours and I make it the best piece in one continuous thing, maybe, or whatever, you set the rules, but you have to set rules and you have to meet the expectations of your rules. And if you don't, and you maybe hate your masterpiece and everybody else loves it, and you're not fulfilled, but you have that drive to keep on moving forward on the next thing, and you still have the drive to like, okay, I put those hours in and I just do it no matter what everybody else says, but it's like setting goals.
Yeah. Well, and it's like, it's like Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 hours, and you have to put that 10,000 hours in to master anything. And, what's really interesting, you always bring up the video game examples. I'm going to bring up one now. Like, if you play something like, like a Fortnite or something out there, what's interesting is you're already doing that, right? You're not, when you play those games, you're not thinking of your 100th game, are you? No. Are you you're thinking about that game. I'm going to win this game. And what happens when you don't lose that game? Well, you just go right back into the queue and you play the next game. Yeah. And I think like if we could start to think more like that as an artist or as a designer or anything, is like you're going to win this game. Like don't try to not win it. But if you don't, that's fine. Move on to the next game. And if you can get good at that approach of like, it's almost like when you're running, for anyone out there who's a distance runner, they'll understand this, that your pace may slow down at some points, especially when you do a longer run. Let's say you're at the 10-mile point, your pace may be less than you were at the 2-mile point. So how do you quicken? Well, a lot of people will tell you, find objects to focus on. And if you focus on an object, you'll actually move towards it faster as a runner. So the same thing I think can happen in your creative career, where if you're not focusing on those objects, you're not finding those key points, and you're finding those kind of goals, then you are moving kind of slow. You won't even realize it.
With that being said, though, like having those goals like that are approaching in the distance, and you're working hard to achieve them, you also have to take the step back. Let's say you're playing Fortnite. Everybody plays Fortnite. It's a big game. It's like your 10,000 hours mean nothing now because everybody puts in the 10,000 hours. So the new 10,000 hours is like maybe the next 20 or 30,000. Or if you only have 10,000 hours and you want to be the best, you basically have to step one step back after hour one and hyper analyze and just like put, instead of more playing, more analyzing, and become more strategic and become more intelligent while spending the 10,000 hours. So you get better results for your 10,000 hours. So there's like a big difference in mastery, how you apply it, because like if everybody does art, if everybody does video, 10,000 hours don't matter,
Yeah. Well, something you really touched on there just very briefly is there's one part of the process that I think is what really brings it all together, and it's the review. You got to review yourself. You got to stop. You got to pause. You got to take a step back and say, what am I doing wrong? So yet again, in Fortnite, if you're not winning the Fortnite games, maybe it's like, you know what? I haven't watched one YouTube video about how to play Fortnite better, or like, or I haven't really read one blog post about like anyone's tips on Fortnite. Like it could be like, things like that. So even in the creative and design world, there's stuff like that all the time where I'm catching myself being like, okay, Sean, you've done this a lot this way, but if we take 1 second to just check this other way, we may find something way better. And that's why I change tool sets for web design probably every couple of years at least. And that's because it's like there's a lot of me pausing and being very humble about it. Like yet again, like there's that ego being external versus internal, where like if you're external, you're attaching your ego to the tools. Like it's this tool set, I'm not going to do it any other way. Well, there may be a better tool set. And if you're going to only sit there and focus on that tool set, then everyone else is going to hop on the new one, especially the new people. Yeah. The new people aren't going to hop on your old tool set. They're going to hop on the new one.
Yeah, so the ego can be a crutch and can be a superpower. And it's just like, let's say you're on the top of the game, you will not adapt to other people's play styles because they're inefficient, because like you're top of the game. Like, why would I learn from other people, And then is when the ego becomes a crutch. You did web design or videography for 5-10 years, whatever. And now there's a new editing software like CapCut, why would I play with that? I know the professional editing softwares, like, oh, now they have AI, now they have this, and and they're producing more work, and slowly creeps up on you, and if you don't have the knowledge about like, hey, your ego is a superpower and a weakness at the same time, and we all should adapt and play and learn, then you basically can get lost in a circle where it's like, no, I'm the best. Oh, no, I'm not anymore the best. Oh, everything sucks because it's not my fault. But right. It's just like it can become very dangerous. But I think like the biggest part here is now, if you're a young creative and you're basically starting out in a new path, in a new career, and you basically, let's say it's a new game, and you want to become a professional esports candidate, or you want to be an artist who's like creating a lot of art now, and I'm like going to do that Twitch thing, for example, because we talked about that. The best thing we can do right now is like, if you start out new somewhere and you're at square one, the best way to start over is not just jumping into it and just doing. It's like, no, breaking it down. Like, what do other people do? What are the tutorials? What are the tactics? What are the speed runs? Because then you learn more from the speed runs by trying to copy and copy a lesson that somebody else did, and then you build on top of it.
Well, and yet again, I'd love you to touch that. It's the exact same way that masters used to teach their students, is that you need to try to do the master work, right? So like try to recreate the thing. If you're going to be a logo designer, then recreate the Apple logo without tracing it. Don't trace it. Put the Apple logo here, recreate it over here. Doing little things like that. And then, so I have a friend that's learning web development right now, and he's doing a great job, but he got lost in the sauce in terms of like, I don't have any clients. Like, what am I supposed to do? And I'm not a great designer. I'm a developer. So I'm getting caught in these design decisions where it's not looking good, but that's not my job though. My job's to be a coder. So like he was having such a hard time with it, where I told him, here's what you do, man. Just spend an hour. See how far you get. Act like I just gave you a client. Like go get a random prompt and just do it. Make it quick. And then stop at an hour. Have a hard stop and then do it again. Yeah. And then see how much farther you get in the process, because that first part of any project, as we know, it can sometimes be the hardest part when it's just all the whiteboard grayness, weird. Yeah. When you get hired for your first project, I don't know if you can remember the first video you ever got hired to make or whatever. It's tough because there's so much you're like, oh my God, like I didn't really realize like the process of this and how this breaks down. There's so much you learn in the process.
Yeah, so that goes kind of back to the Dunning-Kruger effect, where it's just like in the beginning you think you know, but you actually don't know, Mm-hmm. And that is like where we have to be really, really aware. If you start something out new and you think you have a good understanding, and that basically means like you're the client, you want to do it now yourself, you hired a videographer, and now you want to edit your own videos, for example. Watch a tutorial and try to cover the tutorial, and then you still will think like yours is better than the original, but actually you don't know. So there's a balance of just keep on doing the thing and, pushing through the learning curves, but then still try to like, oh, where could I have done better,
Well, and just understand that there is this cycle of, and this is essentially the order of it. You don't know what you don't know. You know what you don't know. Then you don't know what you know. And then the mastery is you know what you know. Yeah. And that's the cycle, and that cycle repeats over and over and over again in your career. So that's what I would tell any young person too, is just understand you're at the beginning of this process. You actually don't know what you don't know, and there's something beautiful to that too. There's a lot of beauty in breaking rules before you knew the rules and know the rules. So I think like I would say if I was a young creative, you don't know what you're gonna do yet, but you know the things you do like. Then what I would say is spend the time in improving those. And what does that mean? I don't know. That's for you to experiment and figure out. That's part of the process. That may be the first step is how do I push what I like to do, or how do I define what I like to do into something else? And that takes experimentation. That may be the first step, is experiment, fail, fall on your face, have the awkward thing, see how hard this actually will be.
Or have just fun with it, It does not have to be painful, because like in the end, so I kind of see everything now in like universal lessons, Everything is like a bigger concept that is like really simple, but you can apply it to everything. So in the weird way, it's like, okay, if you want to learn guitar, you basically just start playing. You buy a guitar, you have no idea, you probably do the wrong thing. Mm-hmm. Then you cover songs, you learn to cover, you learn how to read, and there's no right or wrong way. The only question is like, how long can you keep on going, and what is your workflow? Is your workflow better than somebody else's, where it's like, oh, I actually have a guy who helps me, I have a friend who's like playing with me, or hey, I'm actually actively thinking, because actively thinking is a thing that most people don't really do. What sounds like, we're humans, we're thinking all the time. No, we don't, because everything is automated. We are just like, okay, do I brush my teeth at night? We automatically do. We don't really think about that. Is that really a good decision, because the decision was already made, and your habits decide how well you get in the masteries aspect. But you have to actively revision or take a look back on what did you do, does this work out, and the more active you think, the better it becomes in a weird way with the time put in.
No, I think that, and I think you're right, and I do agree with you on like you need to have fun too at the beginning. You really do. You need to enjoy it. You need to play. There needs to be this sense of play. Definitely don't lose sense of that. What I would also tell people is make it. I say this a lot, but make it your identity. And how do you do that? Well, do other things than doing the thing. It's really interesting. Like earlier I said, look at a YouTube video about the thing, but start to read books? Is there a talks in the area that you can go to? Is there meetups that you can go to? There's so much you can gain at one meetup. To go to the meetup and have all these professionals that already do that, and they love talking about themselves. So, we always say on the show, like, ask people questions about themselves, so a meetup and things like that, it's great. So if you're a young person, and let me tell you this, like, if you're a young person and you show up and you actually show that you care, that's a very attractive thing to someone that may want to hire you. Okay. Yeah. So that too with creativity is like, show that you're not willing to take the shortcut. The shortcuts sitting at home and watching tutorials about the thing maybe, are just doing it and doing it wrong and calling yourself that thing. That's the shortcuts. The real thing is to go out, be humble, and actually see what you can take in, what you can be a sponge of.
Yeah. I think like it's kind of like mastery is like the endurance runner, like you will be probably never there, but if you burn out too quickly, it's bad because then you cannot achieve mastery. So you kind of have to run at the perfect pace so that you don't get burned out or burnt in a weird way, but you run it at the right pace with the right intensity, with the right stakes, and you revise your running. Do you focus on your breathing? You focus on your running, and you break it down. Do you learn often enough new things at the right pace, or do you learn too much instead of doing? And there's like the perfect balance of like the Zen mode where it's like, okay, we're doing this thing. I'm not burned out. I'm kind of happy. I'm kind of unhappy. I'm hungry enough to still keep on pushing, and I got that fire and I don't let the fire die, or I refuel the fire, because I'm catching myself like, oh, I'm burning out, because like mastery, it's always easy to start the new thing, and sometimes you need to jump to a new thing to become a master, but you never know what is the right moment to jump, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I would definitely caution people on jumping too much. I see that a lot with people that once the going gets tough, once the horse bucks them off and they hit their head on the ground, they don't want to get back on the horse again. I think that's a big thing too, is you're going to be tested. I tell everyone that. Anyone that thinks that any of this creative stuff's easy, and the creative thing itself may be easy, but the handling the clients may not be easy, making it make you money is not going to be easy. There's lots to these things that aren't easy. You're gonna get kicked off. So like what you said earlier, you kind of need to have fun. I agree with that. If you're not having fun and you're not in love with these things, so at the very beginning, if you're already,
love is a big word though.
Well, you kind of do though. I mean, if I hadn't loved design, I would have been long gone by now. Like there's been so many things during this process that, even the student loan of it, me having student loans has been such a constant test of like, well, if you love this, you're still paying monthly fee to love this thing. Yeah. And so it's, so you really do have to be in love with it. I would really tell people that you really have to, and what does that mean? What is that love? Does it need to be like intense love? No, I'm not saying that, but it needs to get you excited. You need to like literally get excited to do the thing at the very beginning. I'm not saying like necessarily later, but at the very beginning, you should be like, that's kind of cool. I really like that. I learned a lot. Like if you're not in that zone, I would be very sensitive to that. You may want to try something else, because if you're not like in love with it when the going's good and you don't have a client yelling at you and you don't have something going wrong, then God, you're gonna give up later.
Yeah, no, you're right with that. And there's like, as we said, everything in life is a balance, and it's like, it's impossible to say, do you need to love something? Do you need to just like it? Because everybody's different. Some people are just like, they fall in love with stuff and they fall out of love and they go back into it, where other people, they're just like very intelligent and they achieve mastery insanely fast. And then are those talented people, that are just like, okay, they kind of picked something out. They went really hard. They got a good upbringing. They had all their basic lessons and they were at the right time, at the right place. It becomes easy and they mastered it, and now they can move on to the next thing and they can switch around faster. But the one thing that I learned was like, you need to first master one thing before you can make money off of it, in a weird way.
Exactly. I mean, it's a good topic to bring up too, is that, I think we live in this time that we think that we can master multiple things at once, right? That I can, especially, in the web design world, is a great example of like, I can master SEO, ADA compliance, web design, and then all the components like email marketing, social media. I probably already said that, but like, so there's all of those things, and while they're proxies, it's like you do need to focus on the thing at the very beginning. You really do. You need to try to focus in. And what I would tell people too, and this is how I get through some stuff, is when you're learning something that's like not sexy, it's difficult, it's dry, that's a good sign that your value just went up. Okay. If it's easy and sexy, you just press a button, wham, bam, you got lots of competition. But if you're reading something, you're like, dang, oh my God, I have to reread this. I don't even understand what I just read. That's a good sign that your value is going up, because a lot of people think of this thing as a trail. Think of this creative journey as a trail that's going up, and it's getting more treacherous at times than others. And some people are getting to that big crevasse and they're going, no way, I'm done. This is where I'm going to set up camp. But if you have that, you're going to throw the rope and you're going to tie it and you're going to go ahead and sloth across that crevasse. Your value just went up. Okay. So that's what I would tell people. So now with like AI and stuff coming out, I know that that's what we're doing is like, I don't want to just use AI. I want to get real good at using AI. And I'm trying to push the bounds and how that gets into my space. That's an example of a new thing. Me as a seasoned creative, I could sit there and be like, this is just too much. I don't really know. But I see that it's helping the passion. It's helping my passion by helping alleviate some things.
Yeah. And I think like, it is like everything is changing. We always have to learn and adapt, and pain is the gain. Basically, it's like you said, if it becomes easy, you basically are losing, and you always should be like, oh, what is the next painful thing I could do? Is it the networking event? Do I try to avoid this? Where do I avoid pain? And what would that mean? What would that entail? What is the lesson of that? Because like usually it's like, oh, I don't want to do the edit. Like, why you don't want to do the edit? Is it like because you're not good at it, or because you don't know the answer for what is going on there? Do you don't have a game plan for the edit, and when you edit you realize like, oh, this is becoming painful? It's like there's always somewhere pain, and there's the answers. If you commit to the pain, you will figure out what is the pain point, why is it the pain point, and then you can work on figuring this out, and that is the path to mastery. Search for the pain, basically.
Yeah. You are hungry for the things that you could do better. You are literally appreciate it when someone's like, yeah, but did you know this? And if you don't know that thing, you should be like, oh my God, I'm writing that down. I'm going to look that up tonight. I am so psyched that you just showed me something I had no idea of. And honestly, me in the web design world, that is constant. I mean, like literally constant. There's stuff I don't know about. And I'm like, wait, what? There's now that thing, and now there's this thing. So it's like, that's where the mastery comes in. It comes back to you're the weapon, right? It's not all these tools. It's all these things. You're the weapon. So how can you stay sharp?
Yeah. With that being said, like you touched on something that's very important for every young person listening to it, because like you're probably like watching AI, you're watching the new tools that are being developed all the time. There's probably every week like 5-10 new tools coming out, and it's literally that bad right now. Like society is moving at the fastest pace ever. There's a new time management tool, there's a new AR tool, there's a new whatever, and you learned maybe 10% of the new tool, and then already a new tool is out. And that is where mastery comes in. It will be your anchor, where it's like, okay, we're not mastering one tool maybe right now. We're mastering the industry. And I see there's a trend going on with this tool. I kind of have to look into it, but I also like, I need to know the basics, but I cannot get lost in the sauce. And sometimes you have to make a decision as like, okay, if I pick this new tool will be used and will be mastered to 100%, even though there's maybe 5 other new tools coming out, and that can be maybe game breaking, can be not, but you have to be willing to commit to like a new trend, because like everything is moving on now, but it maybe will be like, oh, you learned this new tool, you committed now all that time, and maybe be not the best, but in 5 years somebody will ask like, or 2 years or 1 year, it's like, who can operate this tool, because like I'm familiar with it, and you're the expert.
Yeah. And the only thing I would say that only slightly pushes back on that is the, you don't have to fall in love with stuff too. So if there is a new tool, let's say, and you try it and you don't like it, that's still good. It's the whole know thy enemy type of thing too. So if you're a web designer and you're like, I am so anti Squarespace, I'm so anti this, give it to the customer, and they think that they're just as good of a web designer as me, that's fine and all, but you should still go open up a Squarespace account and get in there. Know thy enemy. Know who you are up against then. So, because you don't ever want to be in that meeting where you're like, yeah, I don't use that thing because it doesn't do that. And they're like, what are you talking about? It's been doing that for a year. And it actually does this too. And then you're like, but okay, well, it doesn't do this. And they're like, well, no, it does. It does that too. You don't ever want to have that meeting. Know thy enemy. Know what you're up against.
Yeah. And I think that is like very powerful in these times now, that it's like, it's nearly doesn't really matter what you know anymore, because like you could Google tool for X, Y, and Z, and or YouTube how to do X, Y, and Z, and somebody will use a tool to do that, and you just need to follow the steps step by step. And you have to be mentally flexible, and that is also a skill. It's like not everybody can follow like a YouTube video and do step by step, and that is like it is a Achilles if things are changing and get developed and the tool doesn't look anymore the same, and you cannot really operate the tool because you're not the expert in that region. But it's like, you got to be flexible and you got to be hardened in like doing the work.
Yeah, and I guess so, and I guess what we've been talking about this entire time is like, you're looking at the world and you're kind of like creating your vision around that world, but now to kind of switch it a little bit too is, be stubborn in your own vision. If you've got a weird vision, we're entering a time where the weirder your vision, probably the better, honestly. So like I would also caution, if you're a young creative and you're trying to understand like, how do I master without like, selling out essentially, I would say stay stubborn on your original vision. Even if you have to make it a separate little thing you do on the side and separate it out from the other thing, I think that's fine. Just don't lose sense of that, because I think a lot of young creatives, we have these passion projects when we're young, these things that we do that are kind of dorky and they don't really make sense. They're not, an 8-year-old doesn't know how to monetize his weird drawings that he makes, but like, don't lose sight of that. Like, don't lose that. Like, because there is something there. And if you do lose that, then it's not something that like you're going to just be in your 30s or 40s and be like, oh yeah, I remember that. It's not going to happen. It can actually just disappear completely. So I would say that too. For a young creative, if there's that one weird thing you do and you're like, I don't know how the heck I could ever make this a job, that's fine. Keep it going somehow. Keep that thing boiling, and then maybe keep learning skills and see how you can flip those into it, because you'd be surprised. Like, so one example for me is I used to make really dorky castle drawings when I was a young kid. Like, so I loved making like the castle walls, and they would be cascading and there'd be mountains around it. But then, as a young kid, I was like, this ain't gonna make any money. Like, there's nothing.
Did you thought about money as a kiddo?
Well, your parents make you think that, right? Because you're like, you get in your teens and they're just like, they're kind of like, stop doing that, do this instead. Stop doing that, do that instead. But if I would have kept doing that, and I also used to make dorky like maps in the style of Lord of the Rings, and guess what? Now there's guys that do that. They just make of Michigan, here's the Lord of the Rings map, because they stayed on that path. They stayed on that journey. They stayed on that dorky. I know, and now we could just get AI to do it, but they stayed on the path, and now they've monetized it. It was something that when I was a kid I was like, there's no way, but like if I would have kept down that path, I could be making really cool illustrations of castles right now and selling those on Etsy for something. But I didn't. So that's what I would say is, if you're young, you have that weird thing, keep that thing going. Do not lose sight of that thing.
And I mean, with that being said, like, there's no right or wrong. There's also, just keep the fire going, keep that thing going. Like we said, like if you're running, keep on running as long as possible till you burn out, till the point there's no going. And then you maybe switch it up, and then you take all the lessons that you had with that thing and apply it to the new thing, because the lessons are the same. Like, you only learn to work hard, and after you learned to work hard, you can use that to a new thing, what is maybe more rewarding. But that is like the thing, like and also like learn to learn, after you learned those two things, you learned how to work, learn to learn, and then it's like, oh, now you learn to how take advantage of certain things, or timing and all that stuff, right? That are all lessons that are universal, and that means maybe you're a Fortnite player, you learned the game, you mastered it, and all the things that you mastered, the game is now out and it's not anymore a thing, and new game. Now you can speed run the process and try to, can I learn this faster? Can I learn like the basics faster? And that is like the new lessons,
Yeah, and you do. To just quickly touch this, first person shooters are a funny example, right? I learned how to shoot on old things like Counter-Strike 1 and Halo 1 and all these like older games, but I get a new first person shooter and I'm pretty up to speed pretty quickly, because that is still there. So that's kind of me tying into that example, but I did want to bring us to kind of the final thing of mastery, like kind of your final step of mastery is something that you preach all the time. And honestly, hopefully when this podcast is doing its best, it does. And that's teach. That is kind of the step of mastery, is to give to the world.
With that being said, though, I forgot one key part. We all need to know ourselves. When I was like 13 and I wanted to master, so I went to a game convention and I'm like, oh, there's like Warcraft 3 and that is the strategy game of the time, and I was like, it's a strategy game you build and people compete, they win money, they make money with like esports, and I was a little kiddo. I'm like, I want to be part of that, I want to do that. And then I bought like a game magazine and they are like, okay, the player thought about how long it takes to get from A to B, and so he can time certain things, and there were strategies. And what I basically learned is like there's very intelligent people out there and some people are less intelligent. I include myself into that category, and that does not really matter as long as you have good rules, good, boundaries, because like you can make something work and be like, you can be the boss of a company and you can be an idiot, to be quite honest. I saw it in real life and I'm like, I don't know how they kept like a company going, but they did. And all they do is just hire the right people because they have the right rules, and that basically keeps them alive. But if you learn now a new thing and you're not the smartest, you basically should just follow best practice and then improve on that.
Yeah,
instead of like going through it yourself because you think you're a shiznit.
The shiznit. Yeah, well, you play to your strengths. I mean, that's the thing. Like, so even that guy that's not good at running a company, but he's good at hiring people, well, he played off of his strengths. Just lean fully into that. And, I think all you really need in life is a few good home runs at the exact right time, and you have success, right? I think everything that's been best in my career were home runs at the exact right time. And when is that time? It's never obvious. It's never when you even think it is. The things that you prepare the most for are not where the home runs happen. They happen at the weirdest times, So I think, I think it's just understanding that, and really, so it's also just loving the process. Like you got to love the process, not the outcome. You have to love that you're doing it. Yet again, to go back to Salvador Dali, when you look at a master's art pieces, you don't say like these do get like these are bad and they get better. You're like, no, these are good and then they got different and then it got different, but they're still good. Yeah. Like, so it's like, it's just that. It's like these are just like snapshots in time of the process. Think of that. Like you're just creating as good. If you just keep your own quality of work up in your own head, then the snapshots will look better and better and better, and they're not necessarily getting better, but they're changing, and that's cool.
Yeah, I think like just like this like gets to one. It's basically like you just keep on playing the game. You keep on drawing like Dali did, and then over 60, 50 years, he maybe hits a home run. He maybe, but you will never find out if you not just keep on playing. And then that is like the whole gist of it. You need to keep on playing with that game, and you need to keep on going, and just like believing in it, setting the right goals, and just trying to hit a home run. Because like if you don't keep trying, you maybe will not hit the home run. You maybe will not buy Bitcoin because you never tried to invest, Like if you're an investor and you're looking for new opportunities, you will find one. But if you like get beaten down and now you're not looking for new investments or, or things you believe in, you will not invest. So you got to keep staying in the game, keep on playing. It's like playing poker. It's not to win with one hand the whole game. It's like, no, you keep on playing, You try to stay as long as possible in the game till you hit the home run,
Yeah. I love what you said. Keep trying and failing. That's the best thing. Don't just fail, but try and fail. Try to do the best work you can all the time. Obviously, get the boundaries up. Don't let it affect your life, but try. You always got to try. Don't ever get to this place where you're like, I'm not going to try on this, but I'm going to try on that. Just try on everything. Yeah. Even if it's a project that you don't want to put a lot of energy in, you should still try.
Yeah. With this being said, I think this is now the end of the podcast.
Make sure to like and subscribe. We're on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts.
Yeah. This was odd, but we're out. So,
master the podcast world. Love you guys.
Yeah. Have a good one. Bye.